Hey, good evening, Minesh.
Hey Ben, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, very good.
Good. I believe we're kicking off our one-on-one at the moment. For everyone that's watching, I'm Ben Wong, and I am the AGM at Eureka under New World Development. We're an open innovation platform that helps startups integrate with business units. I have the great pleasure to have Minesh, a dear friend, ex-colleague, friend for life, I believe, who
Yes.
has just founded an amazing startup, and he has an amazing story to tell. I think before we kind of dive into the topic on how Manesh, you've successfully pivoted into $1 million business, maybe you can start off by telling the audience on a little bit about yourself, who you are, and why you wanted to take this journey of being a startup founder.
Okay. Ben, you know my background, but for everybody's information, so I've been in the B2B media space and the sourcing space for the last 20 something years. Started my career in Yellow Pages in India, moved on to Taiwan, then China, then Hong Kong, then New York, London, and then back to Hong Kong. And it's been a very interesting ride wherein I have worked with retailers, wholesalers, importers, Amazon sellers, all kinds of buyers, and understood the challenges of the retail industry and what is changing in the retail sector. This experience and this knowledge of what are the problems of the industry and what is happening was one of the reasons that drove me into it. The other reason was also that after 20 years of working for really large corporates, I worked for an Indian stock exchange listed company, a FTSE listed company, a NASDAQ listed company, and so on and so forth. And after working for those in senior management roles, I did realize that what I am doing right now, or what I was doing, was making money for the investors rather than really solving any major problems in the industry. And that was the other reason why I thought, okay, there are problems in the industry which nobody is looking at, nobody's solving, and these problems are going to propel. And as you know, this was way before the coronavirus era. And after that, the problems that we were thinking about are only going to accelerate, right?
Yeah, so I think that's a good segue in terms of how you've kind of taken this journey. Well, why don't you share with us about what is Buyhive? What's the initial business model
Okay.
first? Yeah.
So as I said, we wanted to solve a problem, and the problem that we identified was that a lot of buyers would not be able to travel internationally to source. And that would be to either attend trade shows or to go and source at the factories. And the reasons we were thinking back in last year was because of increasing costs, decreasing sizes of retailers, decreasing budgets of retailers, as well as the budget pressure that they were feeling from all sides, from PEs coming into picture, or the retail sales going down. So one of the data that I refer to always is the KPMG data on brick and mortar stores. And in 2019, there was something like 9,000 brick and mortar stores that went out of business, right? But at the same time, the number of online sellers was increasing on a 100% basis. And the total retail was still on an increase of about 25% annually, right? Which would mean that the retail was moving from the big box or the brick and mortar to the online sellers. And the way sourcing happened was changing. So with Buyhive, what we wanted to do is for this new set of buyers who are not able to travel, or for the old buyers who won't be travel or able to travel, we wanted to create a platform which provides experienced sourcing professionals who do the sourcing, attend the trade shows on your behalf, and capture that information through our customized platform, on which they can update that information in such a way that the buyers would get a sourcing report which they can use and they can buy through. And
Right.
that was the simple idea with which we started the business.
Absolutely. And the market, I think, is clear, right, Manesh? Prior to the COVID-19 situation that we're in today, trade shows are integral in the sourcing process where buyers from all over the world would travel to Hong Kong, for instance, to be able to access new products. They would then hop over the border to check in on their manufacturers. So not only Hong Kong, globally, there are a lot of locations that hold these type of trade shows, which again, it's part of being a buyer and part of the sourcing process, which is important. Now, obviously, this then leads us to, given that you guys started your company prior to COVID-19, you know, what did COVID-19 force you guys to do, or how did you guys take advantage of the situation? And, coming back to the topic, what did you do to pivot your company to your advantage?
Yeah. So before I talk about the pivot, the information for the viewers is also important is the co-founders I had, right? So
Mhm.
my co-founders, Brent Barnes, who was the CEO of Global Sources when it was Nasdaq listed, and Michael Hung, who owns one of the larger trading houses in Hong Kong. So these co-founders and me started this company, Buyhive. And frankly, I left my job at the previous company, Global Sources, on 31st of December. We started rolling in on 1st of January, and we brought out the product in the first week of February. And that was exactly the time when Hong Kong got hit with COVID, and the world had not yet known China was going crazy. The numbers were booming every day, and we were completely caught off guard, where we would say, oh, either we wait for this to get over and trade shows start coming back, or we need to pivot in some way, right? So at that point of time, the first pivot we did was, okay, if buyers are not able to come, if there are no trade shows happening, how will they buy? Are the retailers going to stop buying? So we said, okay, no, retailers are going to keep buying. Suppliers are going to need to sell. How do we connect these two? By using the expertise of sourcing professionals, right? So we say we do it whether or not without a trade show, we can do it virtually, and we rolled in the virtual sourcing platform with it, wherein they would do exactly same things as a trade show, but without a trade show. And they're going to use, so somebody who has 15 years of experience buying mobile cases will be able to update that information for the buyers to look at. And this was before the PPE craziness happened, right? So that was our first pivot. The second pivot happened around the middle of February, pretty much in 10-15 days of this pivot. And we realized that because we turned on the virtual sourcing part, we started getting a lot of requests. About 99% of the requests were related to PPEs. At that time, people were asking masks and gloves and gowns and stuff like that. Masks being the craziness at those days. Simple three-ply masks to KN95s to N95s and so on and so forth. And a lot of people started because of our connections, because of Brent's connections, my connections, Michael's connections, and seeing what we were doing with Buyhive. They said, oh, great, you're finding us suppliers. We don't want just suppliers. Can you also get us the product? Because we can't travel. We don't have any people to do any of the QC in the factories. We don't have anybody to do the compliance, nobody to do inspections. Can you handle it? So that's when we said, okay, let's pivot again. We said we will do a tie up with Michael's parent company, which is Headwind, which already had about 40 people in production in China and about 30 people in Hong Kong. We said we'll do a joint venture. Buyhive becomes the arm through which we channel in the business, and we help people get the sourcing. Our mission was sourcing made easy. So we said, okay, how can we make all these process easy for them? How can we make them trust the process? And how can we get them the product when they really need? And that's how we got into it on the second pivot. And then we haven't looked back since that end of February to now. We haven't looked back at all.
Great. And I think just to quickly summarize for people who are just logging in, to our interview here is that you guys came up with a solution for people, especially sourcing professionals globally, to access virtual trade shows in a sense of a gig economy platform. With COVID hitting the markets everywhere, essentially, especially in Hong Kong initially, you guys saw the opportunity of offering virtual sourcing experiences for people who cannot, come to Hong Kong per se. But then COVID kind of, blew up very quickly locally and then at an international level. So you guys saw an increased demand for products where people can't be here. So you guys are essentially working as an agent to be able to fulfill these demands, leveraging the network. Now, I think going through these multiple stages of pivoting and development, it can't be easy, right? I mean, I would imagine that you guys came up with this idea, this gig economy idea of bringing or leveraging local buyers to access trade shows. How difficult was it for you guys to decide to pivot to where you guys are at today? Obviously, a huge benefit to what you guys have done. Um, what were some of the factors that helped you guys make that decisions? Were there some conflicts, throughout that whole entire process as well?
Yeah. So, so one of the things that or one of the guiding principles for us while we were pivoting was that we want to, anything we do, the focus has to be revenue. If we can get the top line in, doesn't matter what we do, because we were not going to go raise capital. We are very clear. We don't want to wait for the capital to come in. We don't want to wait for the traction to come in. We don't want to get external help to do that. So we said, whatever our three of us founders were there at that point of time, right? So we said, okay, what is our network? What is our connections? How and what can get us revenue? And once we looked at the scenario from that perspective, that all we want is to bring in revenue, bring in traction, and prove that we can conduct business in these tough times, it was very clear no matter what we did, we won't have a conflict. And the three of us, so the other thing that is important, that's why I was mentioning the founders, is that when you know your founders so well, so Brent and I have known each other and worked with each other for 15 something years. Michael and I know each other for about 15, 16 years. We all know each other so well. We trust each other so much that when we make decisions, it's very, very easy. We all know, we are not trying to do something which is personally beneficial. We are always trying to look at the company's benefit, and we don't have that trust issue. And that is a very big factor when you're pivoting. Making decisions while you're pivoting are very important. It is very important that everybody who has a stake in that business is able to understand why you're pivoting and trust why you're pivoting works. If one of our founders was somebody that we did not trust or somebody who did not trust us, the whole thing would have fallen.
Right, right. That's important. And, I mean, that's a huge testament to Buyhive that, in a span of, call it 7 months, you guys have been able to become a $1 million startup. And I'm sure million spans to a larger number. But obviously it's not all easy, right? I mean, pivoting is not necessarily easy. So let's go back to kind of the factors that were difficult to decide on that we could share with the audience who, maybe also start themselves and are always asking if they should be pivoting. What was going through your mind when you did that?
So the biggest thing, like I said before, was the revenue. And because none of us are earning any cash from the company, or we were investing our own money, we wanted to make sure that every penny that we invest in generates something in return. So
Right.
we were not worried about anything else but revenue. And that clear focus helps you drive. So it could be revenue for some people, for other startups it might be product development, for somebody else it might be something else that is their KPI. But once you set your KPI as the founders, you got to stick to it, and you got to make any means, any efforts to achieve that. And that is the biggest thing I think I would tell anybody from our learning. So we did find it difficult, but when we looked at it from that perspective, that this is our focus, this is our KPI, we want to hit a certain revenue by a certain month, it was not that difficult.
Got it. Thank you, Minesh. And I think right now I have a few more questions for you, Minesh. And I think this is also a good time for us to engage people who have logged in. If you have any questions, do feel free to start submitting them in a Q&A session. But back to the questions for you, Minesh. Do you think that without the pivot, you could have still been able to make the original business idea of Buyhive work?
Frankly, no, because we would have depended on a trade show. We would have depended on buyers whose businesses are sinking during that time. And nobody is doing anything else but PPEs for the last 3 months or so. So, if you look at the world right now, all those retailers, wholesalers, importers, all of them are struggling. And those that are not doing PPEs are pretty much either chapter 11 or closing shop or cutting costs, whatever they're doing to do that. So no, we wouldn't have survived. And then the biggest thing that this gives us is that we're not moving away from our business, the core business that we started with. This is giving us the rocket fuel to invest into it rather than me going crowdfunding or me going out and going to VCs and do the funding or spending my own money, selling my house and investing. I don't have to do any of that because all the money that now I'm going to invest into building the business is coming from the revenue that is generated. Right? We are
Yeah.
investing all of the revenue back into the company, and we have with a staff of about 20 people, I will have a runway of 18 months to do what I want to do without raising a single penny outside and not having a single more dollar made outside from anybody or even any sales done from today. So that's a very comfortable situation.
Right, that's amazing. So just to clarify, I mean, the money that you guys have been able to accrue, the revenue from the PPE initiative, now allows you to reinvest in the company. And what the solution you're really looking for is to offer kind of a virtual source of experience from almost end to end in a virtual respect for buyers worldwide,
Yeah.
especially because you are strategically located here in Hong Kong to be able to access the manufacturers, and given the accessibility of the international markets from Hong Kong, you're able to also capture, essentially both audiences.
Yeah.
Great. Um, so we all also understand that COVID caught us all by surprise. I understand that you did very well pre-COVID to make a decision to essentially get yourselves to where you're at. You're very much revenue focused. You have a great team of founders that were aligned on that initiative. Were there additional KPIs that you had to set amongst your team to be able to get you guys to accelerate yourself to be able to address the PPE needs worldwide?
Yeah, so we then the other other KPIs that we had to set because of the PPI trade was that we wanted from day one, we set a process in place. The process was we need to identify the factories or the suppliers through our network. The second step was, okay, you identified the factories. How do you then achieve their qualifications, right? So there is, you know how many articles have been written about all the fake PPEs, all the fake problems and rejections, etc., etc. If we didn't have the experience, we would have the same. We haven't had any of that because we did the qualifications check by documentation. We sent in people into those factories to do that, and we had about 9 rejections out of every 10, 9 were rejected. So we got 10% return on those, but it was an investment we made. We invested in making sure that we send in people like Intertech or SGS and check their reports and cross-verify those documentation, etc. Then we did documentation with the factories, which could get the contracts in place so that we don't get screwed up somewhere, and we don't have to take the liability of millions of dollars. Again, all these comes from experience. Then we got into a place where we set up KPIs for the factories that we were working with in terms of the timelines, because timelines were very short. Everything had to be done yesterday, not like the traditional sourcing business. So we had to set those KPIs with the factories and convey them the KPIs, explain them the quality standards of different clients, and so on and so forth. So all that made us kind of change and deliver and update our KPIs pretty much on a daily basis. There was nothing stable. And like I said, with a good team, with a team that trusts you and with a team that works with you, it was not that difficult. But if you have one person or two persons that don't trust you, it can be a drag.
Got it. And again, I want to reiterate to the crowd who just joined us that, again, Minesh, CEO and founder of Buyhive, making it easy to source a complete end-to-end virtual experience. And again, if you do have any questions for Minesh, feel free to submit your questions again in the Q&A session. Minesh, I think given that we're still in the midst globally with COVID-19, what have you seen? I mean, there was obviously a shortage in the call it markets outside of Hong Kong and China when COVID hit, and you guys were able to fulfill these demands. What is the environment now with the supply and the demand still globally for
So
PE?
the supply and demand side both have started kind of cleaning up. There were a lot of bubbles. There was a lot of fake middlemen. There was a lot of scammers, and all that has cleaned up a lot to our advantage. So now the trade that we are doing or the business we're doing, it's slowed down. It's not crazy, and the demand is not crazy. But the every deal that we do, or every buyer that we meet, or every supplier that we work with has been vetted, verified, and it's more sustainable kind of business. What we did before was a lot of one-offs. So it has become kind of more sustainable. But that's where we are pivoting again then. So as you know, now we know we have a network of freelance sourcing professionals across categories that we have gathered over the last 5, 6 months. We have experienced ourselves the trading part, and we have done about 20 million US dollars worth of trade of those PPEs and understood how it all works. We saw the pitfalls of it, we saw the non-transparency of it, we saw the challenges that we faced as well as our buyers faced because of that. So the next stage that we are getting in, or the next pivot we're getting in, is we're working on a new e-commerce platform model. I won't talk about the partners that I've already tied up with, but I am tying up with the partners. The main reason for that is that the e-commerce in the future is going to be based on trust. And what we want to provide in the e-commerce platform is an end-to-end solution where buyer can come in, buyer can say, I want XYZ product. I want, say it's a bulk e-commerce platform. So I want 100,000 pieces, 500,000 pieces, or whatever that thing is. I want to be able to do transactions on your platform. I want to be able to buy QC inspections on your platform. I want to be able to do trade finance on your platform. I want to do logistics on your platform. So an end-to-end solution to this. And the cool thing of that is that all the suppliers that will be on this platform will be vetted by these experienced sourcing professionals that we have gathered here. It won't be advertisers. It won't be people paying money, people paying tons of money to rank higher, or people paying us to try and give them the leads, etc. Won't happen on this platform. And it will be only and only based on qualifications that will be done by experienced sourcing professionals. So that would bring in a new level of trust and make it easy in the future and post-COVID, when less and less people will travel, to source these products.
And
And what
that's a really interesting view on your pivot, Minesh. I think you and I were ex-colleagues at one point, and we definitely understood that companies that are offering the sourcing marketplaces are trying to address the trust element for the longest time, I think a good 2, 3 decades at the moment. So what are the factors that you see at Buyhive that you're able to address to be able to actually communicate to buyers worldwide that are sourcing on your platform, the trust factor?
Okay. So the biggest problem with platforms, I won't name them, but you know all of them, is that all of them are based on advertising. You pay $50,000, you're ranked highest. If you pay 40,000, you're a little lower. 20,000, you're much lower, and that's how they all work, right? Whether it is the largest platforms like Alibaba or smaller platforms like Made in China and Global Sources or whichever others, right? So they all have this advertising model. That is a conflict of interest. When you start charging people like that, what happens is that people or factories that are not good factories but have money to spend are going to be shown up higher. What we do is change that model. Somebody who has experience, so you have experience, let's say in electronics, and you've done it for 15 years, and you understand that particular type of electronics very well. It is like uh, television electronics or television related products. You understand that very well. You speak the business language, you speak the industry knowledge, you have the industry knowledge, and you have connections in that network. You say these five factories are good for that product or these five suppliers are good for, the weight of that is way more than somebody having paid money to advertise and be higher up there. And that's where we are changing the model. And these guys would go out, they'll find the factories, and then we will further qualify them. Then we will further have partners that would qualify them. And only then the suppliers will be allowed to be listed on, and you'll be having full access to their credit histories, to their testing, inspection, compliance histories, and so on and so forth.
Got it. Got it. Manesh, I think we're going to ask you to address one more question. And I'm going to tell you the question first, and then I want to wrap it up here for the audience. The question is, what would you say to the startup community, especially startup founders, on how they should prepare to pivot? Right. In the meantime, I think I'm going to wrap it up by kind of summarizing our discussions today. But what I gather is that for a company to pivot the level of success that you guys have achieved is the direct focus of revenue being your target, and that you are able to also get that type of alignment with the founders that you have, and that everyone is driven towards the same goal. That's super important. But the third factor I thought that was interesting, and I could gather, is that it seems to me like pivoting is part of your genes of your company at Buyhive, which is important. I think that is a testament to how flexible you guys are in continuing to push your solution required that especially whenever there is a market demand. PPE was definitely one of them. Now we're going into a mode where COVID is here to stay. Maybe a different version of it will be around in the future. So a virtual sourcing, a virtual way to buy with trust is now where you guys are moving towards, which is super important. Call it the silver lining of COVID. It has forced everyone to really start experimenting with virtual ways of doing business, where in the past it required people to actually travel to Hong Kong and to Shenzhen to source for electronics per se. So coming back to you, Minesh, to share back with the community of our startup founders, what would you tell them on how to prepare for a potential pivot for them?
So the biggest thing in a pivot that I have learned is like we talked before, is the focus on it. And the second thing is to get the buy-in of your entire team and have the trust of the entire team. Pivots are very difficult because we as human beings don't like change, and change is difficult for everybody to accept. So unless until you are putting in, so as a leader, as a CEO, as the founder, or the guy who has the ideas, you would have to put an extra effort to internally sell the idea. Don't take it lightly. You might understand it, you might know it, but that doesn't mean much. You have to communicate it well. Write it down, put it in emails, even to your founders. Don't just do co-founders, don't just do meetings and accept that to happen. Summarize all of it, put it in black and white, make them understand it. Even if you have to do PowerPoints and presentations for your internal team, do it. But communicating, explaining it, and then pivoting is very important. Not just pivoting because one of the founders thought it was, but having the entire team pivot together is very important.
Great. Minesh, I think that's a great wrap up and great recommendation on how startups should really get alignment throughout their team. I mean, essentially, if you're the leader and the founder of the idea, you also have to be able to kind of align your whole entire team. It does take more than one person in a company to drive change per
Yep.
se. I think that's all the time that we have today, Minesh. Again, thank you everyone for logging in. Minesh, CEO and founder of Buyhive. And I'm Ben Wong at Eureka Nova. Thank you everyone for joining us today.